My name is Rick Brimacombe, and on behalf of the Minneapolis Club, Upsize Minnesota, and my group, Club E, welcome to our discussion on growing revenue and increasing profit. The workshop today will help us better understand the interwoven and sometimes complex relationship between revenue, expenses, and profits, and to help business owners build better businesses and have a better understanding of best practices in this area. Upsize Minnesota and Club E have assembled today's event, and I will be introducing you to our panel of experts who can serve as your trusted advisors. Upsize Minnesota is a how-to magazine devoted to helping business owners build bigger and more profitable companies. Club E and my firm, Brimacombe Capital, inspire business owners like you to achieve more than you thought possible by providing strategic and financial support. In our efforts to provide actionable content, Upsize Minnesota and Club E offer you today's panel, and as such, I want to introduce you to our event sponsors. Leander Limited is a boutique CPA firm, and Minnesota Sales Institute is a sales training and executive coaching organization. Thank you to our sponsors, and I'm excited for today's event as I've had a number of positive interactions with both of our panelists here today over the last several years. So I think you're going to get a lot out of the conversation, and it'll be well worth your time and effort in braving the cold. So with that, let me introduce you to our panelists. To my immediate left is Ron Leander, CEO and founder and COS implementer. And then Scott Plum is president and founder of Minnesota Sales Institute and co-host of the Get in the Door podcast. So gentlemen, welcome today, and thank you for being here. And, yep. So now that we've met our panelists, let's hear from them as to how they fit into today's discussion about growing revenue and increasing profit. And so panelists, why don't you each share a little bit about your bio and your background and how you got here. And why don't we start with you first, Ron?
I'm Ron Leander. I'm a CPA and a business developer, and my primary focus on my practice is to do fractional CFO work. I started my career with 6 years in corporate America at 3M, Medtronic, and Jostens, and those jobs are about how do you make money, which is very different than going into a CPA firm and learning how do you prepare financial statements and do tax returns. I think that growth is more fun than doing sort of the compliance work. And I worked in industry for 6 years, then I started my CPA firm in 1981, so in June 1st it will be 38 years of doing this. And so in that period of time, I generally don't see anything new anymore. And I think that's primarily an age thing and just being involved in a lot of different situations. And so what I really like to do is help people get on that hockey stick growth curve and really see how they get something really incredible out of their business instead of just kind of doing okay. So how I fit into this is the clients I work with, I want them to grow and make more money. And, and I'm there to be the catalyst to challenge them to see what they're really capable of doing, which oftentimes is much higher than what they would have ever imagined. And then secondly, hold them accountable to it. And I use tools like EOS to help me through that process. But most of what I do is sort of intuitive because I've seen it before.
Great. Thank you very much. Scott?
I've been in sales since 1987 and started my career selling real estate and did that up until 2002 when I started the Minnesota Sales Institute. And I really wanted to work with inspiring and leading salespeople to get better results out of their behavior. And in my work, I usually get hired by individuals for individual coaching. I look at them as kind of the committed attendees. If you go to an event, there's an attendee. I also work with companies that invite me in to develop their sales team, and sometimes I get sendees. So their boss sends them to me to try to change their behavior. And that's a challenge, and it keeps me sharp, which is always great, putting myself in those situations where I'm trying to influence and convince somebody to change their behavior. I really believe that every result that we have starts with the behavior, what are we doing or not doing, and that starts with the belief system that we have that supports the behavior. So we've got unsupportive beliefs and we've got supportive beliefs. A lot of salespeople I talk to, they were taught at a very young age not to talk to strangers. Well, how's that going as a salesperson? Another one that I deal with a lot with salespeople that they go, it's not polite to talk about money. I go, how's that going for you as a salesperson? So these beliefs have a direct impact on the behavior gives us our results. So if we look at, I'm really in the behavior modification business because I've been told by one of my clients that training is for horses and dogs, and I have to work with people on changing their behavior. The situation that I usually see a salesperson and prospect in is very similar to watching a baseball game when you see the pressure between a batter and a catcher, or batter and a pitcher. So there's this 3-2 count, 3 balls, 2 strikes, it's the top of the 9th. One team is leading, and you see this pressure between the two of them. Is the batter gonna strike out? Is the pitcher gonna throw a strike, or is the batter gonna hit the ball? And there's just this tremendous pressure between the two, batter and pitcher. Is very similar to a salesperson and a prospect. And if we can change those conversations to get more structured on what is the desired outcome, what is the goal that both want to achieve, and then work together on that, is going to have a completely different conversation. I really teach salespeople to get on the same side as their prospect and work together against a problem, work together towards a goal. And when you're doing that, now you're collaborating, you're committing, and when you do that, you're really going to have a customer for life when you do that. So a lot of my work is working for companies where they invite me in. I do fractional sales management, I do individual coaching, I do seminars, classes, workshops, anything that I can do to really have an impact on the sales culture. Lately, I've been doing a lot of executive coaching where I'm working with the CEO, the person that's in charge, ultimately, of the income that comes into the organization. So my belief is sales is the engine that pulls the train. And if nobody sells anything, nothing happens. And I really work on top line revenue. And Ron is going to work on the management after the revenue comes in and affect the profit.
All right, thank you. And so, as you heard, between the two guys, there's 55 years of managing their own respective businesses, serving the categories that they're here to talk to you about today. So you have access to some wonderful resources. I have a couple of things that we'll go through, but there will be ample time to have you ask questions if you want. So let me get through a little bit more here, and then if you have a question along the way, please raise your hand and we'll weave you in. So now that we've heard a little bit about your background, each of you guys, Ron, why don't you start off and share a couple minutes about kind of your take on this subject and give us a little bit of background as to what you view kind of as the main points that you want to share with everybody today.
I think one of the underlying characteristics I see is that most people that I run into are not financially stable in their lives, and the path they're going on will probably not improve that situation very much. And so I get really highly interested to understand where people are in terms of their personal investable assets, because the business then becomes a tool to drive revenue and profit so that they can meet their personal objectives. And so in my experience, I've worked on about 25 workouts with companies that are in amazingly horrible financial situations. One of those was a company losing $100,000 a month with no end in sight. They had gone through $5 million in working capital, and the guy says, "Can you help me?" And I'm going, "Sure." And so it took 2 years to turn that company around, another year to do a roadshow, and he sold the company for $26 million. That was pretty cool. He was pretty thankful. His son and his son's best friend worked for him, and I told those young guys, I said, "You need to go find something else to do. This is going to get sold, and you're out of a job." And so they tried a couple of different things, and then they decided to get into the ATM industry. Back in the day when if you wanted to get cash out of your bank, you wrote a check to cash. Oh, wait a minute. We're more advanced now. We can use our debit card at our bank. Why don't we be able to use a debit card at an ATM anywhere in the world? And so I went there as the CFO, and my job title was keep an eye on things. And I just love that job description because it's open-ended, and I can pursue what I want to pursue for that client. And so we grew by more than $50 million in 4 years, and I was employee number 11. So that gives you an indication that we were pretty small. And we had no idea where this was going. We knew it was a big opportunity, but it was sort of hard to quantify that. And so being in that sort of growth environment, and then having worked with workouts that are very stressful, negative, the owner's worn out physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, and now you're working with this growth thing and you're not dealing with problems all day long, you're just chasing opportunities. It's really exciting, and I get pretty excited, as maybe you can tell. I get pretty passionate about helping people. And so in this discussion we have about how do you grow revenue and how do you increase profitability, I think that my background really is sort of ideally situated to that. And I like to challenge people to say, what are you really capable of doing? I think you can do more than you've ever thought possible. And so what I do then is focus on getting that to happen for the people that I work with and enjoying it. Should be an enjoyable ride.
Great, thank you. Scott, tell us a little bit about kind of the main takeaways you want to share with people today.
The topic today on growing revenue, and I've written it out to make sure that I just describe it accurately, is proactively influencing the best fit prospects about the costs, consequences, and risks of the gap between where they are and where they want to be. I think too often companies really focus on the solutions and their salespeople are taught to be a problem solver, when in reality they should be taught to be a problem finder. In a lot of companies that invite me in, it usually starts with a CEO or a business owner inviting me in saying, Scott, my people have a closing problem. And I go in and I meet with the CEO and I meet with some of the salespeople and I discover quickly they don't have a closing problem, they have an opening problem. They're not getting in front of enough prospects. In fact, they don't even know what the best fit prospect is. In fact, they don't even really know what the problem is that they solve. And they really don't know what the costs and consequences of the main competition that every company deals with, and that's inaction. It's prospects doing nothing after a meeting with a salesperson. And the biggest problem that all of that compounds to is a lack of a value proposition that a company has. What are you really selling? What are you really bringing to the marketplace? I get companies call me up and they talk with me and I ask them, what problems do you solve? Well, we do this, this, and this. Okay, well, I can see right away what the problem is that we don't know what the problem is. So when we're taught to be problem solvers and we're releasing these salespeople enthusiastically motivated onto the marketplace, but they don't know what they're hunting, they bring back anything. And when they bring back a prospect that's not a very good fit, we end up spending a lot of time with that prospect. We end up really cutting into our gross margin, which then affects our net profits because we're spending time with prospects that are not qualified because we don't have a really clear value proposition. So now when I'm working with executives, the leadership of a company, we're spending more time on the value proposition, we're really understanding the marketplace, and we're developing that before we start training the salespeople to go out and have better conversations. Leverage the opportunities that you create. Start by creating more opportunities, then leverage those opportunities that you create. And every transaction is a chance to build a relationship. But they end up going for the shortcut, the quick fix. Let's cut the price, let's win the business, let's get the transaction, and let's get the deal done, and then let's move on. And that's not a long-term growth strategy. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So why don't we stay down there with you for a minute, Scott? So you've had a long and successful career in sales. What intrigued you about that profession early on?
Well, I'm the oldest of 7 kids, so I've always been kind of in that leadership role. And in my career of working in sales, I went through a sales assessment on a career and what would be a good career for me. So the final result was I could be a good teacher, counselor, or school bus driver. And I'm going to wait on the school bus driver as sort of the twilight career that I will have. But I've taken the strength finders. I also have empathy as a strength of my top 5. And empathy is being able to see the situation from another person's perspective. And when I'm working with somebody, and it can be a strength and it can be a liability, because I can really start to buy into salespeople's habit of excuse making. Sometimes I feel like a doctor. I'm curing excuse-itis. I go out into the marketplace, I cure excuse-itis. but I can be empathetic with them so I can see it from their situation and from their position. But then I want to work with them to be able to change their behavior to get a different outcome. And I really love working with people and applying the influence and persuasion skills that help people get a better outcome. The person that created the problem is not the same person that's going to fix the problem. So the only way the problem is going to be solved is if something comes in from the outside. And I'm grateful when I'm invited in to work with somebody to solve a problem, to work on achieving a goal, to have a mutual commitment towards a desired outcome and work together on it. I'm not a real fan of using the word help. So I tell salespeople right away, stop helping people. Start working with them. Because helping is about control. And when you offer help to somebody who doesn't want to change, they're going to fight you to maintain control. If you work with them, you've both communicated a desirable outcome and you're both mutually committed to achieving that destination. That's working together. That's coming on the same side of the table, working with your prospect, your customer, your client against a challenge, a problem, a goal that they want to have. When we're helping somebody, we're assuming that they want to change. Most people struggle with change. Some of you that are familiar with The Odd Couple, with Jack Klugman and Tony Randall, the opening credits, the scenes, remember when Tony Randall was trying to help this old lady across the... And what does he get? He gets a handbag to the head. Because the woman's like, I don't need your help. What makes you think I have a problem? So here's a salesperson. You probably have taken this call from many salespeople. They say, hey, I help you get on the front page of Google. And I say to myself, you know, what makes you think I have a problem? What makes you think I need your help? You type in sales training, Minnesota, I'm on the first page. So salespeople that want to change the conversation need to start with changing the offer. And they need to start saying, you know, I work with companies to do this, this, and this. I don't want to assume you have any problems in this area or that you even need my help. Is it okay if I ask you a few questions? Now we're taking this assumptive salesperson out and we're replacing them with somebody that really is looking for a qualified prospect to commit to a desired outcome that both people are able to accomplish together.
Great, thank
Thanks.
you. So Ron, you got into accounting in college, but then obviously decided to stay in the industry for a long time. Well, what was it about the industry and the work that you did that kept you intrigued over the years?
When I was in high school, I went to White Bear Lake High School, and I was in an accelerated math program. And so when I got to college, the first math class I took was a calculus class, and I had the same book I had in high school. So that was the easiest 5-credit A I ever got. I thought, man, this is easy, right? And so I like being analytical. I like seeing trends. I like understanding the math behind what's going on in people's businesses and in their lives. That's what really intrigues me and kind of holds me close to this. And then certainly I have an affinity, I think like Scott, of working with people to figure out what really is the desired outcome. How do you get out of this? What you'd really like to get out of this? And that's what really drives me to help people. And we're pretty blessed in the Midwest to deal with some pretty wonderful people here. It's not often that we have to fire a client. That doesn't happen very often. And I think that, like in our ages, hopefully we've been around enough that we can sort of figure out right away who we want to deal with and who we don't. And so it's about getting that desired outcome and never giving up until you get there, and engaging clients to think and articulate what is going on in their minds. And one of the key things in all of this is building a rock-solid organization. So in the ATM company, when in 4 years we went from 11 people to 120, I spent about half my time figuring out, what does the organization look like? In the words of EOS, we build an accountability chart. And we changed cultures. Instead of in the old days, if we needed to hire somebody, we'd go find somebody with the technical skills we wanted. And I said, we're not going to do that. We're going to build the right culture, and that's going to be the cornerstone of the company. And we're going to find people, and once we get them, we'll figure out where to have them sit. And so, like Stephen Covey says, you know, we need to get the wrong people off the bus, the right people on the bus, figure out where to have those people sit on the bus, and then figure out where to drive the bus. I love doing that. It's very fulfilling.
So you touched on a little bit on the EOS side of your business. So talk a little bit more about how you integrate EOS into your practice.
So the tools of EOS are used differently. We have the biggest hotbed of EOS implementers in the country are in Minneapolis. And if I said, how many people have read the book Traction, please raise your hands. And this is typical. A lot of people have read Traction. Some have read like 50 pages and put it down and said, I'll let somebody show me. We see people that are EOS self-implementation. Sometimes that works extremely well. Sometimes people sort of let it sort of go away after a while. I like using the EOS tools because, we deal first of all with people of going, people are our greatest asset. We get everything in the company done through people. And do we have the right people on the bus, and are they doing the right things? And how does that correlate into what our strategy is? And so building that team of really solid people, which is not easy these days because it's hard to find people, right? Anybody have a problem finding people? It's everywhere. And so, that's the biggest tool I like from that. There's a data analytics part of it that I really thrive on, and I create analytics for virtually all of our clients, and I'll say to the clients, here's how I evaluate your business, and get them to buy into that and get them to think like that, because I'm pursuing the thing that will drive them the most. And then we work on those analytics to say, how do we improve the analytics? If we improve the analytics, guess what? Our results are better, right? It goes hand in hand.
Great, thank you. Scott, back to you. Most of the companies have 3 layers of hierarchy as it relates to generating revenue. You have the owner, the manager, and the salesperson. What are the key responsibilities between those, and then the stressors between them?
Sure. The goal of a salesperson, and this is a goal that I teach, and this is a goal that I follow every day, is to find a prospect that's willing to pay me for a product or service I can provide and deliver at a profit. So every single day, find a prospect that's willing to pay me for a product or service I can provide and deliver at a profit. And they really have to hit all 5 of those. Find a prospect. If you don't find a prospect, nobody's going to buy anything from you in the office, I assure you. This is why I didn't sell real estate very well. It's because I was in the office. And my broker came by my desk and said, how you doing, Scott? And I said, good, I'm ready. I got my briefcase, I got my map book, I got my HP 12C, I got my lockbox. I got my MLS books, printed every 2 weeks. And the broker said to me, Scott, I got news for you. I go, yeah, what's that? Nobody in the office is going to buy anything from you. You got to get out of the office. So I got out of the office. That's a salesperson's goal. You got to find a prospect. If you don't find one that's going to pay you, well, it's not going to go very far. If you're not going to be able to provide and deliver a product or service, then you're just going to upset a lot of people. And if you don't do it at a profit, you're going to be having the controller, the CFO, somebody's going to be talking to you, because now you're running a nonprofit. And nonprofits call me and they say, do you work with nonprofits? I said, yes, as long as it's not contagious. I work with a nonprofit. But every single dollar that's cut off the top line revenue eats at the margin. And salespeople just have a really tough time understanding that. So they cut the price to win the business. And it's a concession. It's not something that they trade. So what can you trade? Well, how about a testimonial? And they go, gosh, are you willing to give us a little bit of a discount or something? Say, well, maybe if you do a testimonial for us, we might do it. And they go, okay, well, can you do 10%? That's a testimonial. Can you do 20%? Oh, you want to do a video testimony? Okay, now we're talking like, whoa, wait a minute here. I don't know if I like the direction this is going. I said, oh, okay, so we're going to settle at just 10% and a testimonial? So trade something. Too often salespeople are cutting the price to win the business. Sales managers. You really manage a process. It's people, like Ron said, and process. I work with companies, and they say, when should we invite you in? I said, invite me in when you feel like you got the right people. If you don't feel like you have the right people, invite me in. We'll work on getting the right people. And it's a lot like weeding a garden. There are some people that are weeds, and they need to go. And we eventually turn the sales team over. And then with that, we start getting the people, and then managing the process. Sales managers are responsible for the process. The company leaders, the CEO, the owner of the company, is to really work on maintaining the market share within the market and adapt accordingly. Too often, companies do not change according to the marketplace, and the marketplace ends up passing them by. I mean, the two types of group that I work with are one group that's been around for 25, 35 years, and all of a sudden the faucet's been turned off. And they invite me in, and then we find out we've got some old strategies, we've got some old techniques, we've got some sales process that just doesn't work in today's marketplace. And the other one is a company that is new, that is being launched, that they want to have a scalable system and a foundation that they can build on when it comes to hiring salespeople. And my mantra is reward the behavior you want to instill. And when you create a comp plan where you're happy, if your salespeople are selling $100,000, you're just as joyful as if they're selling $1 million. And when they're at $10 million, you're even more joyful because you've created a compensation plan where you're getting rewarded for that activity. Comp plans for superstar salespeople, you got to give them incentives. You got to give them that stretch goals. And this is written about in the Harvard Business Review. Low salaries, high incentives for going beyond what is the minimally required. And when the owners of the company really maintain their value proposition and they change according to the marketplace, they're going to stay in the marketplace longer. What happened to Sears is just still amazes me that this company did not change. Even though everybody's buying habits did, this company never changed. How many have gone to Sears.com? I've never been to Sears.com. I've been, of course, to other retailers.com, but I've never been to Sears.com. And I don't know why. It just really amazes me that they never had an impact on my purchasing influence. Thank you.
So you talked a little bit about changing behaviors. Let's take that thread and pull it a little bit more. How do you develop salespeople so that they can change and adapt new behaviors?
It's very similar to how you position your products or services. It's not about selling the parts or the products, it's about selling what the parts and product will do. It's not about the income that a salesperson makes, it's about what the money the salesperson makes will do. So when you're talking to a salesperson, ask them, what is a lot of money? If they tell you $100 is a lot of money and they're selling $10,000 systems, you're going to have a little rub there. Because their brain cannot get around $100 being a lot of money, but they're selling something that's worth $10,000. So the lifestyle of a salesperson has a direct impact with their behavior. So look at what kind of eating line do they have? What kind of lifestyle do they maintain? What kind of benefits would they have when they end up making more money? It's tough to get people out of that class where they're in and the lifestyle that they have, but it's easy for them to maintain it because we know what it's like when we drop our income. We know how much it costs us when we don't eat. That's our eating line. Bless you. But it's tough for us to get up and get more because we don't know what that's like because we've never experienced it. And this is Napoleon Hill that's talking about, people don't understand what more is because they've never been there, but they know what it's like to lose something. So salespeople are really no different than prospects. And that is lost aversion is 2.5 times more influential. So losing something has 2.5 times more impact than gaining something. So when you're talking with a salesperson and you're putting them on a comp plan and it's based on incentives and they maintain a certain lifestyle, you're rewarding the behavior you want to instill. Most likely you're going to get the behavior out of them that's going to generate the results, that's going to generate the revenue, and they're going to generate the income to maintain the lifestyle that they have. So really getting in touch with what are some of the goals of salespeople, and it's goals, vacations, boats, summer houses, college educations. What will the money do? Just like it's not about the server, the computer parts, it's what the server will do. And really sell on what it'll do, not necessarily the money.
Great, thank you. Ron, you talked about growing a business, and then with your background in accounting, obviously you have
Alex. Sure. So I've been a salesman early in my career, but moved into management and leadership sense. But there's an interesting struggle between in a sales culture where you feel like you have to pay a salesman to pick up the phone. You have to pay him to walk. I mean, every action, every movement he takes, every exertion of energy, you got to pay him. Which is very contrary to the rest of the organization, where there's an expectation of you will do what's expected of you and asked of you out of passion, commitment to the job. So the idea of with private leadership, you get someone 24/7, 365. As a salesperson, you feel like you kind of get them for your last paycheck. What I'm hearing you say is that's okay. It's kind of what I intuited from what you're saying is if you align those goals and they're making that much money, and that's what you want is someone to do that. So I'm kind of having some of the epiphany, but also just questioning whether what I'm hearing.
There's a lot of elements there.
So let me repeat the questions in case somebody didn't hear it over here. So the question that Alex put to Scott was, if most of the organization is incented to do what they're asked to do because they care and they have passion for the business and they're going along with the culture, but the sales folks are more mercenary in nature, how do you incent them for each little step of the journey? And Scott, why don't you give us your take on that?
There's many moving parts in that. So first is the job description, setting the expectations when they're hired. Second is, are they more of a hunter or a farmer? So sometimes I talk with companies that have salespeople and they're really account managers, so they're maintaining a book of business, they're not going out and getting a book of business. The next is the territory. Is there some competitiveness within the office place where there's open territories, or are there protected territories? And sometimes protected territories some salespeople can kind of sit on it, and they're taking it and they're preventing opportunities from coming out of it, so they need to be managed differently. So there's a few moving parts in it, but looking at how long your sales cycle is, really defining the expectations when they're coming in, and really uncovering their motivations as to why does this person get up in the morning? Why do they want to go out and do what they do? And uncovering the sales process and managing each step of the sales process is going to make it a lot easier for management to be able to work with them to impact their behavior and what they're doing or not doing. Sometimes it's management that's coming down of them, sometimes it's peers that are coming at them. So if you're creating a bit of a competitiveness within the team and you're incentivizing individuals for achieving certain goals or milestones, and sometimes it's individual goals, sometimes it's team goals, when you're really looking at all of the moving parts when it comes to a sales team, everything affects another. And that's one of the challenges that I have when I'm invited in, is I have to look at the territories, the job descriptions, the compensation, the communicated expectations. How are they being managed? One of the things that I offer is assessments. So when it comes to developing salespeople, you got to figure out what are they really motivated by. Are they motivated by achievement, developing expertise, control? Are they motivated by money? Sometimes people think, well, if a salesperson is motivated by money, they're going to be very successful. Not necessarily. What they're end up going to do is they're going to be motivated by money, but they're also going to leave for more money. And depending on what you're selling, if you're selling a product or you're selling a service, if they're motivated by money, they might shortchange the service, they might misrepresent the offering in order to get paid, and that's the way they're motivated. And it's tough to manage somebody that's motivated by money because they keep looking for shortcuts versus developing expertise.
Sarah, can you hold that for a second? Ron, anything that you'd like to add to Alex's question?
I'm sort of about building culture. I think that's a critical component, and when I had this big growth opportunity, the culture was just incredible. And so, I believe that people need to be team players and be part of the organization. Sometimes if you have salespeople that they know what their upside potential is if they perform. And so I think a lot of times that's why they might sort of want to sort of delegate away, even if they don't have the authority to do it, to have other people do these things so they can go out and make more money. And sort of what we learn early in life is that You know, I worked at 3M right out of college, and there was a sales guy came there when I came there, and wages were pretty low back then compared to today. So he was making $5,000 more than I am, and in 3 years he was making 10 more than I was. And why is that? Because he had that customer relationship. That's where the value is. And so we don't want to sort of pound on people. They don't want to do sort of the little idiosyncrasies, but we want to make sure they're chasing the big dream, the big goal. And sometimes we probably feel like we sort of have to be understanding of that. In the meantime, no one else in the company who's not in a sales role gets away with that. And so sometimes there's sort of a rub that way. But that's why in a lot of companies I put incentive systems where everybody gets, at least on some level, the same compensation or additional reward, so it gives everybody a reason to do those little things.
Thank you. Sarah, you had a question?
Yeah, I was curious to hear from both of you actually on, we're talking about money as maybe not being the best motivator. I'm curious, is there a motivator that does come to the top regarding bringing money in?
Okay, so to repeat the question for this side of the room, talking about money as a motivator, and if it's not the best motivator, what would other motivators be?
Yeah. In my experience, if I'm hiring somebody and the only reason they're coming to work here is money, I probably don't want to hire them. Because what I'm really looking for is to hire people who believe what I believe. If you find those people that will do that for you, they will do anything for you. And if times get tough, you can depend on them. What happens when time gets tough with the people who are only in it for the money? They leave, right? So, and we know that one of the keys to sustained growth is hanging on to our people and developing them. So as we look for them, we really want to look for cultural fit first, over and above anything you look for, no matter what their reputation is. I've seen that work. Companies like Apple, you know, they have a tribe, right? And people come there and they just want to stay there because it's cool. So I think the money, you got to be in the market, I think, in terms of what the market is paying people. But you really want those people who really get it about what your business is about and what you want to become, because that's what will tie people together and get the company to really see extraordinary benefits. Been there, done that. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. I think the term motivation means to move emotionally. So what is going to cause somebody to have a direct impact on their behavior is really, what's in it for them. I've heard the saying, people don't leave companies, they leave bad managers. And sometimes managers are just focused more about keeping their job or making sure that nothing goes wrong, and they end up losing some of the talent because the talent is not being recognized for their accomplishments. And I think a great meeting to have with a team when you bring them together is to ask them a question: what do you want to be recognized for that you did last week outside of work? And I think you're going to hear some pretty inspirational stories. And when you do that consistently, then you're kind of setting the expectation of, I'm going to ask this question, so be prepared for it next time. In looking at, the motivation, it's going to be, what do you want to be known for also? So if you want to pick 3 words that you want people to use to describe you in your absence, what would it be? And that can be a kind of a challenging exercise for some people. And then ask them, are you living according to these 3 words? If we were to poll the people within the office and you say you wanted to be known by these 3 words, and we polled everybody else in your absence, do you think they'd use those 3 words? How much of a gap would there be? Are we really being in alignment with who we are? And sometimes when we look at our role at work and our role outside of work, there can be a real difference. One of the assessments I offer is to really show that through the different environments that you're in. But finding out what a person's motivation is really going to be able to work with them and guide them and lead them to develop them to get what they want where they are, so that they don't have to go someplace else to get it. because people are in search of it, and if they can't find it here, they're going to find it someplace else.
Great, thank you. Ron, you've talked a couple of times about some of the growth stories that you've been a part of, and so you have a unique perspective in that you've seen significant top-line growth at companies you've been involved in, as well as from the accounting perspective, managing expenses. Talk a little bit about what you think the primary factors are for trying to scale a business.
I'm a big believer in reading a lot, and I like sort of contemporary business book readers. And one that I'm reading now is a book by Vern Harnish, and he founded a company called the Gazelles, and they're business coaches. And he started the EO organization. And so he talks about four things. One is you got to get the people situation figured out, and that's, again, Michael Gerber or to get the right people on the bus, and that whole bus thing, right? You got to have a strong team, a strong organization. You can't do much without that, and you can never ever put too much emphasis on that. Second thing is then figure out your strategy, and by that I mean is, do you want to be the same as everybody else? Because if you are, your margins are going to be poor, they're going to deteriorate. You're not going to be a hot commodity. You're not going to be a hot name on the street, and people aren't going to want to even come to work for you. People want to do cool things, right? We all want to do cool things. And so if you get your strategy right as to how you can be unique, differentiated, you have to get there. Without that, you lose a tremendous amount. So once you get the people straight, the strategy straight, what's your next thing? You got to have execution. You can't just do the same thing every day. We know that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. We know how that works in real life, that if you keep doing the same thing, you get the same results, or maybe you get less results. And so you have to have an execution mentality, and you've got to measure what people do and hold them accountable. You need to tell people what you expect of them, what is their responsibility, and you need to do that the first day you meet them, when you interview them, and you need to keep telling them that. And then you have to do performance reviews that are about how you build them up. I come from the CPA industry where performance reviews is how do you sort of ratchet people down, and then you don't have to pay them a lot more, which is really kind of a sad mentality. It happens, but performance reviews are how do you build people? How do you grow them? And then the last thing is when you're doing this sort of hockey stick growth thing, one of the critical components is get ahead of the game and don't run out of money, because it happens. I worked at a company in Stillwater, and they did a leverage buyout. They sold off the big company, or big part of the company, to fund the little part. And the little part went $1.9 million in revenue, $5 million, $19 million, $43 million, Chapter 11. Stuff happens because you run out of money. When we were growing this ATM company, we had $1 million in collected funds in the bank at all time. We never worried about money. I was spoiled. But running out of money is a problem. And do you have to bring in equity? Because sometimes with fast growth companies, the banks will go to a certain extent, but they want some of your skin in the game, and maybe they'll say, for what you're trying to do, you need more equity players.
What's your thoughts on innovation accounting then?
What's my thoughts on innovation accounting? Well, that can have a different meaning to a lot of different people, but...
reference point.
Oh, what?
Lean startup with Eric Ries is innovation accounting. It's
Yeah.
measuring people.
Yeah, I think that's that's kind of where the industry is going, the old idea of you pump out a financial statement and that's it. I did a workout for a company in St. Paul that was losing $100,000 a month, and their income statement was one page. What can you learn on one page of information? Not very much. And so the idea is to break things down into small components and measure them, which I think is really what you're getting at. Yeah. You have to go there. You have to become more knowledgeable. You have to understand what your income and expense drivers are.
Go back to, if you would, Ron, just for a moment, talking about running out of cash, because Everybody here is trying to grow their business, and it's kind of a interesting dichotomy of, hey, the business is growing, yet we're running out of cash. So maybe explain that a little bit more and talk a little bit about what folks can do to avoid that and how to keep an eye on that problem.
The best way to do that, I think, is to be in a mode of doing cash flow forecasting on a very continual basis. The faster you're trying to go, the more critical that really is. And I encourage people early on, go meet some investment bankers. You may not need them today, but you might need them in the future. So start at least 2 years before you could potentially ever need any money, and lean on these people because they're willing to help, and they've done things in a bigger scale than probably you've ever done. And so I think you use them as a good catalyst to do that, because at some point you're going to lose the ability to finance the growth of your company by using debt. And if you want to keep growing generally, then you're sort of forced to use equity. And so if you're a couple years ahead of that process and you let your investment banker lead you in that process, more than likely you're not going to run out of money.
Great, thank you. Say, Scott, back to you. You alluded to a little bit earlier about the salesperson getting drawn into a debate or discussion around price and being pretty quick to start pulling back on that. How does a salesperson constructively debate a prospect on price?
Work really on what are the costs and consequences and risks of inaction. And when a salesperson asks more questions for a prospect to discover and uncover what happens when the prospect does not have the solution that the salesperson offers, and that's starting to become reality to a prospect, then the solution that they offer has something to stick to. If a salesperson talks about a solution and doesn't have a problem to stick to, the solution has no value. So if we look at it as a formula, is cost minus price equals value. Too often salespeople are trained, and I sound like I'm being really cynical about salespeople, and I just want to stop a moment here. I work in the emergency room of sales companies. So I see everything that's going wrong. And after a while, I get kind of a little jaded with the salespeople that I'm seeing, and I'm not. I'm a very optimistic person. But so often I see what's going wrong, and so salespeople love to talk about their solutions. Because how were they trained? They were trained on product knowledge. We have this 3-week onboarding process. Come in and we're going to spend 3 weeks onboarding you, and we're going to learn everything there is to know about our solutions, and then we're going to give you a phone book, a territory, an email, and go get them. So then you get these motivated salespeople that have all the solution, and then they go out and they just start talking to everybody, and it upsets prospects because prospects are going, what makes you think I have a problem? What makes you think I want to work with you on it? And then, the solution ends up having to be discounted in order for a prospect to buy because the prospect can't really understand what happens if I don't have this product or this solution. So the question to constantly be asking in our head as a salesperson is, what is my prospect experience in the absence of the value my solution provides? So as these salespeople are released into the wild to talk with people representing a company, the salesperson should constantly be asking them, what is my prospect's experience in the absence of the value my solution provides? I am a problem finder, not a problem solver. Everything is going to be compared to that. When I work with a company on onboarding a salesperson, they start at about 8 o'clock, they go through HR, they get all that stuff done. I get them at about 9:30. I teach them enough stuff to tell them at 2 o'clock we're making cold calls. And they just freak out. And they said, well, I just started. I go, you're going to figure it out between now and 2 o'clock. And what the goal is for you to set up appointments for 3 weeks from now. And between now and 3 weeks, you're going to figure out what to say once you get to the appointment. My first job was a dishwasher at Mr. Steak on Snelling and 94 in St. Paul. And my first night was Saturday night, the busiest night. I wanted them to lock the door at 8 o'clock. No, we don't do that, Scott. I compared every day to that first day working as a dishwasher at Mr. Steak, and every day was easier than that. If I start them off making cold calls at 2 o'clock, they're going to be comfortable with it. They're going to feel more natural with it. They're going to figure out what they need to ask and do and say to get the appointment. That's the goal. Too often, we train them. It's analysis paralysis with salespeople. We train them for 3 weeks, and then they go, geez, I just don't know everything. I'm going to study everything there is to possibly know about the company and the products and the services, and it's analysis paralysis. Now they're immobile. They don't do anything because we train them so much on the solution. We don't train them on the problem to look for, and they just feel like they're unprepared, so then they just stop, and they don't do anything. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm cynical, but I see it over and over and over again. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yep. All right. So let's see. Why don't we stay down there? One more on kind of the buying side. So a lot of discussion here about assessing the situation and training the salesperson. From a buyer's perspective, how do they ultimately end up making a purchase decision?
I think a buyer, in most cases, is going to be making the decision based on the best value and not the cheapest price. The challenge is that the salespeople lead with price. One day I'm sitting in my office, and I get a knock on the door, and it's 2 salespeople from a catalog office supply company. And they come in, and I say, come in. And they say, oh, we're from this office supply company. Oh, I see you got that Brother 2170 printer. You know, I can save you money on toner. And I stand up and I look at my shoes and I go, why do you guys got to be like that? And they go, be like that? What do you mean be like that? I said, you come into my office and you insult me. I said, insult you? How did I insult you? I said, you told me that I don't know how to buy toner. You told me that I don't know how to run my business, manage my expenses. You're telling me that I'm wasting money. You're telling me that when you leave and 2 other salespeople come in from another office supply company and they're selling toner for 10 cents less, you're telling me that I should buy from them. They said, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. I said, yeah, you did. You said that I should buy on the cheapest price. Who's turning your product into a commodity? Me, the customer? The prospect? No, you, the salesperson. You're leading with price, when in reality, I buy on the best value. And then salespeople argue about my customers are commoditizing my business. No, they're not. You are. Because you don't know anything about a prospect when you start talking with them. You don't know what's important to them. You don't know what their past experiences have been like. You don't ask enough questions. You don't know about anything about the buying process. You don't ask questions about what happens if they don't buy my product. And you just start offering solutions selling on price instead of understanding the cost and consequences of not having it so that it can be compared to the solution, which then is in exchange for a price. So cost up here, price down here, the difference is value. And people generally, not everybody, will buy on the best value. The challenge is that salespeople focus on price and solutions, and prospects are looking on value. The conversation that's not being talked about is the cost, risk, and consequences of inaction, the prospect doing nothing. And every decision is made based on the consequences. Every decision we make is based on our consequences, either to avoid them or pay for them later. And I can't think of a situation where that doesn't apply. And when we pay for them later, they usually cost more than when we avoid them in the beginning.
Great, thank you. Ron, so you have a unique perspective of wearing these 2 hats, the OS hat and the finance hat. What do you focus on when you meet with the client at first and try to help them improve their profitability?
This should seem sort of obvious because I'm a CPA, but the first thing I want to make sure is, do they have a good set of books? Are they accurate? I came into one workout, and the owner had talked about he got his friends to pump in $900,000 to his business to keep him alive, and I'm looking at his balance sheet and I don't see that debt. 2 sets of books. In about 30 seconds I was out of there because I was looking and going, you're $500,000 upside down, this should be better. This should be better. But then you add the other $900,000 of debt and it's never going to get out. So the first thing is having good, clean financial records. The second thing is having them be detailed enough. In this big workout I did, the guy had his old fleet of Mack trucks and he was so proud because his trucks were paid for. He was so proud of that. And And he was unionized, and nobody in that industry in this state is unionized. He was the only one. What does that say? He's cheap, doesn't take care of his people, so we'll fix you, we'll unionize. And then I learned that the maintenance people are working overtime 46 hours a week every week, and I'm thinking, okay, I better look at that. So I relay out the financial statements, and I go to him after I've done this. He doesn't know I've done this. And I said, what do you think it takes to keep these trucks on the road, just from a maintenance standpoint, for a year? He says, about $5,000 to $7,000 per truck. I said, okay. So I said, here's the number you spent. Put that in your calculator. Hit the divide by key. Hit 68, because that's how many trucks he has. And then the fun part is hit the equals key. And then look at the screen and see what it says. And the guy nearly fell off his chair. $30,000 a year, and he thought it was costing him $5,000 to $7,000 a year. So he spent something like $1.7 million on maintenance that he didn't know he was spending. He had no idea what was going on financially. Total top line guy. He also would look to do a lot of tuck-in acquisitions that would sort of seamlessly fit into his business. So I said, here's your deal. You're looking at two companies. They both do $1 million of sales. One makes zero, the other makes $200,000 of profit, and you don't care which one you buy with your $1 million. Why would you do that? Stop doing that. You know, be thinking about what you do and how that fits into your overall game plan, especially if you're doing M&A work. You really have to understand that. I was at Medtronic when they started doing that. It took them a long time to figure out how to do good M&A work. And that's kind of what happens with the rest of us. We don't really know how to value companies. We all think our company's worth way more than it is, right? And we think that's how we're going to get out of this. We'll sell our company for $1 gazillion, and there aren't any buyers that'll pay that. But it should, go ahead.
I'll let you finish, sorry.
No, go ahead.
How do you find, I'm in the M&A world, how do you find good M&A work? Could you expand on that?
Question, if you didn't hear it over here, is how do you define good M&A work?
Yeah, I assume you're talking about good M&A targets. You know, so who knows the business people that you want to meet? What do they all have in common? They all have a CPA, they all have a banker, they all have a lawyer. So I think you reach out your tentacles to those people. And, you know, I mean, some of the M&A firms will you know, sort of send out flyers and stuff like that. The lower level people like Calhoun does that all the time. And but you get to a little more sophisticated people like Sunbelt, they just rely on their relationships to be able to find people. Or you go through industry organizations you belong to. So this guy, if he was in a sanitation business or somebody's a home builder, they go to the Builders Association of the Twin Cities, that kind of a thing, where there's all people in that same audience that you want to meet.
That answer your question? Yeah. Other questions? Yes, right up here in front, Steve.
Question for Scott. You talked about salespeople needing to be problem finders, not necessarily problem solvers. And I wonder how fear-based, you know, builds into that mindset, and maybe the mindset of a prospect thinking if it's not broken, I'm not going to fix it. And could you talk a little bit about, you know, not wanting to be a Chicken Little and having the sky fall, but how does fear play into?
So the question, if you didn't hear it over on that side of the room, was the being fear-based, and how does that impact the sales process and not wanting to run around like Chicken Little and make a lot of assumptions that don't come true. And so how does fear fit into the sales process?
Yeah, fear selling. It can be manipulative in some cases when it's only benefiting the salesperson. If a salesperson is out there and really wanting to work with prospects to avoid the consequences of not changing or not having a problem avoided, then it's really proposing scenarios that would work with the prospect to uncover and identify that if this were to happen, What would you do next? Or I was talking to the last customer, the last prospect, and they were just going through this, this, and this. And, I'm just really starting to become more aware of that now, and I really want to be able to share that with other people so that they don't have to experience it. And now you're really projecting the situation externally to somebody else, and then you're bringing it into the conversation without telling somebody what to do or without manipulating them. And I'm not a fan of manipulative salespeople at all, but I am a real fan of salespeople being resources and advocates for prospects to avoid the consequences of the absence of a product or service. And when you really create that, every presentation has the FUD slide, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And when you have a conversation and you're covering some of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt in a situation, you're really saying to the prospect, I would really hate for this to happen. And I want to work with you to avoid it from happening. But I would feel really bad if I knew about something and I didn't share it with you just so you knew about it, because if it comes up later and it's something that I could have told you about, I would feel really bad. And I really want you to know about this. So I want to share it to you. You do with it what you want. It's completely up to you. And that's a real strong sales technique is reactance. When you just separate yourself from it, saying, it's completely up to you. You do what you want. It's your choice. And you remove yourself from it. And what the prospect is really saying, wow, you gave me all this great advice, and now what am I going to do? Say no? I just asked you for some help. You came in and helped me. And in that situation, when the prospect asks for help, it's okay to use it, because they're asking for help, and they're willing to give up control to get a solution. So they say, can you help me? And I say, yes, happy to. Thanks for asking.
Ron, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think to keep this real simple in the world that I live in, when I meet somebody, if they're going to be a prospect and ever be a customer, they either have to have pain that I can understand or they have to have pleasure that I can understand. So the pain is, I'm struggling, I'm hurting, cash is tight, and what's accountability in a business? The business owner generally doesn't have that unless he goes home to his wife and she says, honey, we don't have money for groceries. That's accountability. Or heaven forbid their banker would say something, right? No, we can't advance more funds. On the pleasure side is, have you thought of anything where you could make a dynamic impact, positive impact on your business, and you don't know if you should do it or you don't know how to do it and you want some input? So I think it's, whether Scott's saying it or I'm saying it, it's that pain pleasure thing is out there, right? And if people don't perceive that they have any issues at all, you don't have a prospect. It doesn't work. Move on.
Say, Ron, staying down here with you, from your perspective, we've talked about expenses from a couple of different ways, but how do you measure, or how would you perceive the expense item with the highest ROI?
I think definitely it's people. Whatever we do, we leverage through people. We get things done through others. And so building that right organization where you've got a group of rock stars, people that have an itch they can't scratch, and they're just never going to give up, and they've got curiosity. I think there's no better way to build ROI than that. Unless maybe you're in a technology business and maybe that's a different story.
Okay. Scott, anything you'd add to that?
No, that's really kind of more Ron's area.
Okay, well,
I'm
just
kind of top line
checking.
revenue,
Thought there
but-
might be some dynamic sales marketing expense that would be bubbled to the top of your list.
I agree with the people. I think offering incentives for salespeople that go beyond the expectations is a good way of investing in them and maintaining, retention and looking at ways to recognize salespeople. If you can put an ad in a publication and you can honor a salesperson in it, that really ends up, they take some ownership of that, and that really is a good incentive.
Great. All right, stay down there with you. From a sales activity standpoint, what do you see that gets overlooked the most at companies that you work with?
I don't think salespeople ask for referrals enough. There's really 5 outcomes to every conversation that you have. There's a yes, we're going to work together. There's a no, it's not a fit at this time. there's a clear future, which means something coming up in the future. Maybe there's a committee meeting, or maybe there's reviewing of a situation, or maybe a contract or agreement is coming up. There's a lesson where the salesperson learns something. I mean, this is a great question that I always ask in a sales meeting, is I say, what did you learn last week? And if they don't say anything, I'm like, well, this week's going to be the same, because we didn't learn anything last week, predict the same results this week. So what did you learn last week? So lessons learned after every conversation, carry it forward, you're going to improve. And the last is a referral. Imagine if you got a referral from everybody that you're working with that turned into a customer over the course of a year, you would double your income. Just ask for a referral. Now, there's a belief that salespeople have, an unsupportive belief, saying, I can't ask them for a referral, they didn't buy from me. I said, really? Well, what makes you think that they didn't enjoy the conversation and they would want to introduce you to somebody that might be a better fit? Maybe they're not a fit at this time. I mean, congratulations, you didn't spend a lot of time with a prospect that's not a fit, but maybe they know somebody. And you end with, I really appreciate the time together, and I enjoyed our conversation, and it doesn't look like we're going to be able to work together now, but maybe we're going to work in the future, and I'd look forward to that. In the meantime, is there anybody that you know that you might feel comfortable introducing me to, or we might have the same conversation that you and I had? I'd really like that, because I'm guessing you hang around people like you. And you say it a little slower, of course, but you're asking them, could you introduce me to somebody? And my definition of a salesperson is, do you have an impact on the experience and an influence on the outcome? And if you have a positive impact on the experience and you're working with somebody that enjoyed working with you, guess what they want to do? They'd love to introduce you to somebody else. But we don't ask. We just don't ask. We don't ask for a referral. We don't ask for an introduction. I think LinkedIn is a very powerful tool. I think we should be connected to everybody that we talk to. I'll go home today and I'll get on LinkedIn and I'll send anybody an invite that sends me a business card and I have a conversation with. Building that. I go into a company and all of a sudden I'm meeting with the CEO or the owner of the company. They can look at me on LinkedIn and all of a sudden they can see shared connections. And I've had to do this, and they'd say, give me, we got some shared connections. Could you kind of give me a story about some of the people that we shared connections with and how you know them? Happy to. Go through and I'll give an explanation, and guess what my prospect's going to do? They're going to do the same thing. They're going to call some of our shared connections and check me out. And I'm happy they did that. And it usually goes in my favor. Thanks.
And that's a valuable tool, because I know you've done it for me. So thank you. Yeah, Mark, we have a question over here.
So regarding the referrals that you mentioned, do you believe that there should be some kind of incentives, especially like an existing customer? If we went to existing customers and said, would you refer us? Should we be offering them
So the question to this side of the room was, for these referrals, should you offer some kind of incentive to your existing customers to get referrals?
I'm about 51-49% on this answer, so it's really close. My answer is no, I don't. I do not give financial incentives to my customers or somebody that gives me a lead. What I do provide is superior service and attention to the person that they're introducing me to. And I want them to look like a hero for bringing me into the conversation and introducing me to somebody. And if I'm giving them a referral fee or a kickback, it may be perceived that I'm overcharging and this person's paying more so I can give money to them. I really believe that the best way to offer value is to go beyond what is expected. And like Ron was talking about, if a company is running short on sales or revenue, some companies go, well, let's offer a sale. Let's do a 15% off, or let's do something like that. And I go, time out. I mean, you're going to start setting a precedent where you're going to be discounting your product or service, and then people are going to be comparing it to that, and then all of a sudden they're going to wait until you have another sale before they buy, versus adding something in. So add something that you don't usually add in a situation as an incentive or a promotion, then they get more for the same price. But when you start eroding the price, then they start comparing it to that price, and it's a slippery slope, and it doesn't ever turn around. It's just, that's the way prospects are.
Okay, so we're down to the last handful of minutes, so a couple more questions I want to get to. Again, if somebody wants to chime in, I'll try to wave you in. But kind of quick answers, not quite lightning round, but quick answers. This one I added to the list that we talked about ahead of time. It's interesting to me. What's the expense cut most likely to cause harm versus improve profitability?
Ron, that'd be a good one for you.
So one of the things we classically see is a sales rep has a robust territory and is making a lot of money, and the first thing the company thinks about is cutting up the territory. I mean, why would you do that, right? I mean, most of this stuff is just logic, right? Does it make sense to do that? Or to disincentivize salespeople by either eliminating salespeople, which I think is, unless they're just grossly underperforming, I think is a huge mistake generally. But those are the two biggest things I see is cutting territories, cutting commission structures. It's like go out and sell value and don't give it all away. You know, we haven't really talked about pricing, but you know, when I meet a new client, I always ask them, when's the last time you raised prices? Oh, it's been about 6 years. I said, well, could you do that? Could you raise your prices right now by 10% and get away with it? Every one of them thinks for a second and says, yeah, I can do that. So what's my next question? Let's do it on Monday. Oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. But, you know, so that for a moment, I caught them being honest with themselves. And pricing is something you can't ignore. Another thing I see happen on margins is that maybe the product you buy that's part of your manufacturing process, maybe you have 3% inflation, and if you increase your prices by 3%, you've just decreased your margin. That's just simple math. We're looking at gross margins as a percent of revenue, and to make sure that percentage stays where it is, you got to increase at the cost you incurred plus what your normal margin is on that. Most people don't do that, and that's a sin. And you wonder why, if you look over like a 10-year span, your margins used to be like this and now they're like this, and you go, why did that happen? One of the reasons is you haven't kept up with inflation. Another one is you haven't gotten rid of some people who are unprofitable because you've been out discounting to some customers and they push on price and you cave in. At some point, you're going to say, those people got to go. I don't know if you know what a Pareto analysis, P-R-A-E-T-T-O. And so we do this for clients and we'll rank profitability by customer in terms of their gross margins. And we draw a line someplace and we go, everybody below that either has to go up or out. And especially now, what's going on in all of our businesses right now? We're so busy we can't almost get it all done. And so demand is outstripping supply. It's sort of when you were in college and took an economics class and you talked about guns or butter, you know. If you're at full capacity, you have to raise your prices. And that's how you maintain margins. That's one of the ways. And you have to then do that analysis to figure out what customers need to change or go. And if you're not willing to make those difficult decisions, those margins are just going to continue to shrink. There will be no end to that. And then go figure out how to add more value. How do you become so valuable in your customers' eyes they go, we need to deal with you guys because you're the best. That's what we're here for.
I'll take what he said.
All right, so one sentence answer. Scott, why do most sales trainings fail?
Lack of reinforcement. It's kind of a seminar feel-good massage versus occupational therapy.
Okay, Ron, one sentence answer. Why do most financial kind of training projects and EOS implementations go bad?
Most of the time I see it as being a situation where people are self-implemented or the owner doesn't buy into it. And if the owner doesn't buy in over time, no one's going to buy in.
Okay, again, keep it to like a sentence, maybe two. We'll relax the criteria on this one. What's a quick and easy implementation that folks in the audience can go back to their office and do to either help grow their revenue or increase profit for the year?
It's pretty simple. Get after it. Don't keep doing the same thing you're doing every day. Read. Get smarter in your business. Learn something. Grow. talk to your buddies. Everybody has mentors in this day and age. Everybody belongs to Vistage, EO, Inner Circle. Get involved with other people that stretch you to think more deeply about your business.
Raise prices.
Everybody.
My answer would be
Monday.
I'd ask them, what are you going to do different this week that you didn't do last week?
Okay.
Be proactive.
All right. And then kind of wrap it up in a bow for everybody. Closing thoughts, minute or less.
There's a great world out there to be had where we have so much opportunity, and we have to get after it, and we have to be ambitious and believe in ourselves, and we need to grow. We need to do something different. And let's go do cool stuff and not try and be just like everybody else. Let's set ourselves apart and differentiate, and then we have a great story to tell. And then go tell everybody your story. Don't be shy about it. Don't be shy about asking for introductions. People are happy to do that. And go have some fun too, by the way.
And ask for referrals.
Right, exactly.
And connect with Scott on LinkedIn.
Exactly, happy to connect.
Scott?
I would, just if there were 3 things that I would leave that you can implement and work with the sales team or somebody that's in charge of bringing in revenue, is the difference between being reactive and proactive. So being more proactive. A salesperson is a person that has an impact on the experience and an influence on the outcome. Customer service just has an impact on the experience. They're not changing anybody's mind, really. To be more relationary than transactional. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to retain customers. And work with prospects on uncovering the cost so that you can present a solution at a price that's really going to deliver the most value. So cost minus price equals value. When you start asking people value-based questions, like they might ask you, what makes you similar to or what makes you different from, you might say, I appreciate you asking that. Let me ask you, when it comes to making a decision like this, what's most important to you? And when you're really focused on what's most important to the prospect, you're going to have a value-based conversation. It's not going to be in comparison to something, because it may be more of a trick question on what you're similar to or different from, because they might not like it. But if you're really focused on what's most important to them, you're going to have a great conversation. That's what it's about, is having more conversations.
Great, thank you. Again, we can stay as long as you all would like to stay and speak with our panelists. Clube.com, you can sign up for a newsletter for future events. Thank you for being here. Thanks for braving the cold. And the next meeting for Club E is next Thursday, a week from this Thursday. So hope to see you next week. If not, we'll see you soon. Thank you.